welcome to another edition of You Can Get There From Here. I'm Dr. Joe Moore, Chair of the Department of Communication and Digital Media Production at the University of Central Missouri, and it is my pleasure once again to bring you some of our alumni, graduates from Digital Media Production, Communication Studies, and our graduate program. I get to visit with them, talk to them about what they're doing today and how the program helped them get there. Today, we are visiting with Ian Ketterman. Ian is Senior Control and Reporting Analyst for the West Division of PepsiCo, and he is a graduate of our Communication Studies program. Ian, great to have you with us today. How are you doing?
Good. I'm doing good.
So tell us about yourself a little bit. Where are you from and what brought you to UCM?
So I grew up mostly in Lexington, Missouri. Before that, for a couple of years, I lived in Lee Summit and Grandview as a kid, but mostly I would identify myself as growing up out here in Lafayette County. Part of that was I was able to get my associate's degree from Wentworth Military College when it was still around because it was still in Lexington. I did dual credit when I was in high school, and then when I was out of high school, I was able to finish up my associates there in a year, and then UCM just being right down the road from us, it was an easy decision just to go down there and finish up half the degree commuting, and then I lived down there on Pine Street, which everybody is aware of. I lived there my junior and senior year, so it was good times.
All right. Now, when you came in, did you know you were going to study communication studies?
No, I didn't. So when I did my associate's degree at Wentworth, that was mostly focused going towards like an engineering focused, really math heavy, chemistry. I did all the hard sciences they had to offer up there at the time.
That's quite a
Um,
shift.
yeah, and then the first semester at UCM, I was still mostly in that focus, and then there was a couple I guess decisions or circumstances that led me to change it. Um, One was a buddy of mine had just finished his master's, and he was I don't know how he was melancholic of the job market for that area at the time, and then I had met my now wife, so I was ready to get out and get going. We were ready to get started, so I had a conversation with my I think it was Tara Napoleon.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So we had a conversation. I kind of, she asked me questions about me, what I was good at, what I like to do, any jobs I already had my eyes on. So I did a 180 and finished up my communications degree in the spring of 2015, I believe. And then we moved out.
So we talk a lot about that a communication degree is really versatile. I mean, you can do all kinds of things with that communication degree. Is that what you found?
Yeah, it's been interesting to see where I'm at now versus where I was at when I first got out of school. So at the time, I had already been working at Walmart for about 5 years as a support manager, and the store manager and some of the assistants that I was working with at the time, and one of the HR personnel, we all kind of had this agreement that I would help support and be like a manager in training, apprenticeship type thing. So then when I finished my degree, I would go through at the time they had an assistant store manager onboarding program. So when I finished up my bachelor's, that's exactly what happened. I already had a job in waiting, and I went and lived in Nebraska for a few months, and then my now wife and I, girlfriend at the time, we moved up to Iowa, and I worked up there for a few years. Um, but the communications degree was just, there's so much that you can kind of pivot in and out of it. So if I remember, I haven't thought about this in a long time. It's I think I got my communications degree with an emphasis on relations. So it was, a lot of those classes just kind of put words and strategies and ideas to a lot of things that people, especially management and leadership positions, are facing and seeing every day. So it was almost like pulling back a layer and seeing all the tickings underneath of your everyday, conversations, relations, leadership styles, why people act the way they do and say the things they do. So it was beneficial to have that extra knowledge to go on top of the experience that I was building, especially as someone, in their early 20s that all of a sudden had 80 reports, underneath them. So
Well, tell us about your position today as control and reporting analyst for the West Division of PepsiCo.
So as the title states, I cover a third of the country. Indirectly, there's probably around 69, 70. We call them go-to-market warehouses. They're satellite warehouses. What that essentially means is they're non-production sites. They're just warehouses that receive and then sell products. So there's about 70 or so of them out there. Um, 18 of those are wired connects for me. That means they roll up directly underneath me. Um, a lot of what we're doing, and it's kind of pivoted since I was here before, where instead of being on hand trainers for everybody, now we've kind of focused more for like a train the trainer thing. Um, but the big gist of the job is a lot of audit and risk analysis, preventative measures. A large focus of what we do is to make sure that all these go-to-market warehouses stay in compliance with the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, or like SOX testing. Um, and all that is fair reporting, just making sure that the book matches the SKU. What your system says you have is actually what you have. We want to make sure that all these locations are reporting accurately and fairly. Um, so it's just a lot of, communications every day. I have 18 direct warehouses, and each warehouse, there might be a half dozen people that all I have to ask, a different question to get a different answer from. So a lot of my day is spent on calls, kind of asking questions, getting some information, doing risk analysis, filling out forms. Like I said, a lot of preventative measure. It's definitely weird coming in with a communications degree and a lot of like operational experience, because a lot of my colleagues and counterparts, they're like heavy CPA finance majors that have spent most of their life, doing finance, taxes, stuff like that realm. So they're at least 90 degrees away from me from an education standpoint.
Well, you mentioned that when I asked you to be on the show, you talked about some of the things that you were involved in when you were in college, and I want to read back something you said. You said, "quote manage bias, communicate effectively, and understand how to reach people on a personal level." Those are some of the things you picked up in your communication studies degree. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I mean, we had at the time there was a Dale Carnegie specific class, and Terry Kinconen just basically went through in depth that book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Um, and a lot of that stuff, I'm a people person. I get along with a lot of people just from everywhere. I lived in South Kansas City, inner city area for a while. I lived out in the country. We have a lot of immigrants that come up for the harvest season on temporary work cards. Um, so I learned a lot of Spanish in high school just because that's all who lived out there. When I lived in Iowa, there's a really heavy Arabic population south of Des Moines that I don't think a lot of people are aware of. And then there's also, a heavy Amish Mennonite community out there. So just my time traversing the country and working in the roles that I've had, Walmart, Pepsi, I've just been introduced to so many different people and cultures and varieties of, influence, that having seen that and done that, and then being able, like I said, to harken back to, some of these topics that we talked about, how to win friends and influence people, and just kind of seeing that everybody just kind of ticks the same, everybody wants to be appreciated and valued and feel like that they're being listened to. So just being able to sit and listen without having to consciously think of what I'm going to say to them, but just listening to listen, I think has been a big help on growing all these various relationships. And that was something that mentioned when I came back to PepsiCo, that because I had kept in touch for the last 2.5 years, because I'd reached out and maintained all these relationships, that put me on top of the deck for this application. So
Yeah, wouldn't we be a better society if we would just start focusing on how we're similar instead of how we're different? And we'll, like you say, listen to understand instead of listening to respond. That's great. I'm glad to hear all that. You talked about the Dale Carnegie course and how that helped you. Talk about some of the other courses you took while you were at ComStud, or when you're here studying communication studies, and how they've helped you.
there was a lot of these. Um, gosh, I can't remember half the courses. I remember the instructors, and I remember a lot of specific scenarios that we kind of went through. And there was one we went through, and I believe it was a public relations course. I think my junior year down there, um, and it was about I think it was United Airlines breaks guitars maybe, and we watched the guy who has guitar broke, made a music video, and then it got big, and it was just kind of like a how not to deal with instances where something like that happens. And there was just a lot of like experiences in certain situations that we went over and I learned in all those classes that I think accumulatively kind of shaped my mind a little bit on how to like handle certain situations. um and I think as a whole it just kind of gave me this mindset that just be accountable and be understanding, and like you don't have to win conversations. Conversations with especially people that you're managing or your colleagues, you don't have to win. Like you can be amendable with with these folks, but then not lose face or lose respect. And my experience is it's always gained more respect with them when you say, yeah, I goofed up, that's on me. Because none of us are perfect, especially in these positions where you're doing nothing but following up and sending emails, and I have 18 sticky notes on my desktop with 3 screens. um, People are going to make mistakes, and you're going to cross your wires a bit. And I do it all the time, and I just I apologize when I don't up to it, and then we just move on to it. I've seen and I've worked with people that do the opposite. They have to win the conversation, they have to own the subject, and a lot of people just become hesitant to go to those people and seek their advice or present problems to them because they don't want to deal with you know whatever that reaction is going to be. um so a lot of the time it ends up backfiring where I've seen managers that they have to own the conversation, and then people just don't come to them anymore because they don't want to be belittled or berated or have to deal with the feedback that they're going to get. So then they try to deal with it themselves, and it ends up making the problem worse. And it just, yeah.
I'm going to put you on the spot talking because you're talking a lot about leadership and management. And you've talked about some of the classes you've taken. You've talked about your experience with Walmart and with Pepsi. Who would you say is the best leader or best manager you've ever seen? Doesn't have to be somebody you've worked with, maybe just a president, a military leader, something like that. And why?
There's a couple. One of my favorite managers that I have worked with, she's actually retired now. She was a store manager in Higginsville. And Higginsville is kind of a small rural town. It's there's a lot of ag and farmers around. So she had to deal with and work with a lot of misogynistic ideals, I guess I would say. So being a mid 40s woman out in the country, having to answer and deal with these questions and some disrespect, she was able to pivot and just kind of blow it off as needed, and she never took it personal. And I would see her being confronted by somebody that was angry, and they wanted to talk to the man of the warehouse and the manager, and they were very um enthusiastic to let her know that she was a woman and that they needed to to speak to a male. And she just said, okay, you got it, I'll get the manager. And she would go get one of her assistant store managers who would then handle the problem the same way that she said it was going to be handled. And she just never took it personal. She said some people are like that, you're not going to change their mind arguing with them, just blow it off and handle it as fast as you can and let them go. And then there was times that she became a cold-eyed robot, and I saw her rip people apart. So she was a prime example of not having to own the conversation, that the ends justified the means in leadership in some circumstances. So I took a lot out of that. Because we all face bias regardless of who we are, how old we are, our gender. Some of us more or less to an extent. So when I first started managing people, I went to a store that most of the associates had been there 15, 20 plus years. So coming in as a 20-year-old fresh-faced college kid that yeah, you've worked for the company for 5 years, but what do you know compared to me? It would have been really easy to lose face to go in there and try to own the conversations and tell them what I know. And instead I just went in there and listened, and If there were people that were newer and needed some feedback, I gave it. And if there were people that were older and been there, as long as I had been alive at the time, I just asked questions and took feedback, and I just tried to, if I had to, guide the conversations in ways that it needed to go, and just reference, some other senior managers. But I think her style influenced me a lot, just to kind of pivot around and kind of shape, how I approach the conversation on a, basis by basis. So
Yeah, there's an old proverb that says it takes two people to have an argument. So if you're like you're talking about, if you're not going to change their mind and they're not going to change your mind, might as well move on from there. That's some great wisdom to share with us. And speaking of wisdom, we're down to our last couple of questions, and this is where I ask all of my guests to share some of their insights, some of their advice that they would have. You've been in the field, you've taken your degree, and you've run with it. What would you say to a current UCM communication studies student or any UCM student to help motivate them and prepare them for the professional world? And what would you tell to a prospective student, somebody thinking about coming to UCM to study communication studies?
I think if they're already doing it and they're dead set or have a graduation date already, just be open to all opportunities. Um, the role I have, I never expected to have. It was never on my radar, especially when I was in, college. I worked at Walmart, for about 8 years. And at the time, there was a lot of scheduling confrontations and issues. So, I spent 8 years without having a Thanksgiving with my family because that's their big blitz day. So the job I have, I actually have because my wife applied for an open role because she was tired of me working every holiday. So when I first started with Pepsi, I was a production and sales warehouse inventory control manager. And that was nothing that I ever would have looked at or applied to. But she went through the job requirements and matched up, with the experience she knew I had from Walmart, which, there was so much to gain from there covering a whole store. You work in the cash office, you work in the back room, the front room. You learn so much. So she applied, and when I started interviewing, the plant manager at the time said, I can teach anybody the specifics and the nuance of inventory and production warehouses. I can't teach leadership. And um, that's just kind of how I got my foot in the door there. So, there's so many opportunities that people don't even think about that are going to open up. One, because they have the degree, and two, because they know how to work with people. So, that's just kind of an underrated skill. It feels like being able to get along with anybody and everybody and knowing how to just motivate and communicate clearly. I mean, I think a lot of the people right now in school will be shocked when they get out to realize how hard it is for a lot of people just to communicate effectively and clearly and get their ideas across without any underlying bias or people feeling like there's extra context that they're missing. Um, and for people that aren't communications focused yet, if you don't know what you want to do, if you have no idea, nothing sounds good, it's the same thing. There's so many doors that will open up with a degree like this that I never thought, would be possible. So, um, and there's a couple of other degrees out there that will all kind of fill the same niche, but the communications ones I feel is probably a little bit more fun. So,
Yeah. We like it. It's a lot of fun. Yeah, and you can always think about a communications studies degree and minor in something that's going to maybe help fill some of that gap. So, well, Ian, thank you so much for being on today. That's some great advice. Just keep yourself open to ideas and opportunities and just go do it. So, Ian, you've been doing it. You've done really, really well for yourself. We're so proud of you. And thank you for being on the show today.
yeah, sure.
And thanks all of you for tuning in today. Remember, you can catch every episode on our YouTube channel through the UCM Media Network. That's youtube.com/UCMMN. You can also listen on Spotify. Special thanks to Jake Mager for creating our theme music for us. Again, this is Dr. Joe Moore reminding you, you can get there from here. Have a great day.